What happens when Hollywood royalty collides with actual royalty on live television? In just 34 seconds, one careless comment turned a friendly interview into the most explosive talk show moment of the year. Kelly Clarkson, America's beloved sweetheart, found herself face-to-face with Prince Harry in what started as a lighthearted conversation about his latest charitable work. But beneath the surface, tensions were building. What nobody expected was how quickly things would spiral out of control, transforming a simple chat into a confrontation that would leave audiences stunned and one royal guest escorted off the set. The morning began like any other taping of The Kelly Clarkson Show. The studio buzzed with excitement as crew members prepared for what was supposed to be a feel-good interview. Kelly sat in her signature chair, reviewing her notes one last time, her warm smile ready to greet her guest. The audience filed in, their phones tucked away, completely unaware they were about to witness television history. Prince Harry walked onto the set to thunderous applause. He waved confidently, his posture relaxed as he settled into the guest chair. Kelly stood to shake his hand, and the two exchanged pleasantries while the audience's cheers died down. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed perfect. "So wonderful to have you here," Kelly began, her voice carrying that genuine warmth her fans adored. "I have to say, the work you're doing with veterans is truly inspiring." Harry leaned back, a slight smirk playing at his lips. "Well, someone has to do the real work while others just talk about it," he replied. The comment hung in the air for a moment. Kelly's smile wavered, just slightly, but she pressed on like the professional she was. "Right, well, let's talk about your foundation. What inspired you to focus specifically on mental health resources?" Harry shifted in his seat, crossing his legs with an air of superiority. "You know, Kelly, in my position, you see things differently than most people. The struggles of ordinary folks are quite distant from what someone like you might understand." Kelly blinked, her brow furrowing slightly. "I'm sorry, what do you mean by that?" "Well," Harry continued, gesturing dismissively, "people who come from, shall we say, less privileged backgrounds, they don't always grasp the complexities of global humanitarian work. It takes a certain breeding, a certain understanding." The audience stirred uncomfortably. A few gasps could be heard. Kelly straightened in her chair, her expression hardening. "Less privileged backgrounds? I grew up in Texas, raised by a single mother who worked multiple jobs. Are you suggesting that disqualifies me from understanding charity work?" Harry waved his hand as if swatting away a fly. "I didn't mean it personally, Kelly. I'm simply stating facts. The work I do requires perspective that comes from my unique position in the world. You host a talk show. I change lives." The studio went silent. Even the cameras seemed to stop their gentle humming. Kelly's jaw tightened, but she maintained her composure with impressive restraint. "My show has raised over $20 million for various charities. We've helped countless families, built schools, provided medical equipment. But please, do tell me more about changing lives." Harry scoffed. Actually scoffed on camera. "That's adorable, really. But when you've grown up in palaces, when you've dined with world leaders, when you understand real power, these little local efforts seem rather quaint, don't they?" The audience began murmuring loudly now. Someone shouted, "That's not cool." Kelly held up her hand, asking for quiet, but her eyes never left Harry's face. "Little local efforts? Is that what you call helping American families who are struggling?" "Look," Harry said, his tone dripping with condescension. "I understand this is your show, your little kingdom here in your studio, but let's not pretend we're operating on the same level. I was born into actual responsibility. You were born into, what, a trailer park?" The audience erupted. Boos filled the studio. People stood from their seats, shouting at the stage. Kelly remained seated, but her knuckles had turned white as she gripped the armrests of her chair. When she spoke, her voice was calm, measured, and ice cold. "Actually, I was born in a hospital like most people, and yes, my childhood home was modest. My mother struggled to keep food on the table while working as a teacher. She showed me what real hard work looks like, what actual sacrifice means. She taught me that character isn't determined by the house you're born in, but by how you treat people when you have a platform." Harry rolled his eyes. "How touching. Did she also teach you how to interview properly? Because this has been rather disappointing." Kelly stood up. The studio went completely silent. Even the audience stopped their protests, waiting to see what would happen next. She looked at Harry with a mixture of disappointment and determination. "You know what disappoints me?" Kelly said, her voice steady and clear. "I invited you here because I believed in the work you claim to be doing. I thought we could have a meaningful conversation about helping people who truly need it. Instead, you've spent the last several minutes insulting me, insulting my audience, and insulting everyone who didn't happen to be born in a palace." Harry leaned back with an arrogant smirk. "Oh, are we getting sensitive now? Can't handle a little honest conversation?" "Honest?" Kelly's eyebrows shot up. "You call looking down on hardworking Americans honest? You call dismissing genuine charitable work honest? No, what you're being is entitled, and quite frankly, it's disgusting." The audience exploded in cheers and applause. Harry's smirk faltered for just a moment before returning, more forced this time. "Entitled? That's rich coming. From someone who makes millions sitting in a chair asking questions written by other people." "You're absolutely right," Kelly said, nodding slowly. "I do make good money now. Want to know what I do with it? I remember where I came from. I remember what it's like to worry about bills. I remember watching my mom cry because she couldn't afford both groceries and medicine. And instead of looking down on people in those situations, I try to help them. That's the difference between us." Harry stood up abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I don't have to sit here and be lectured by some small-town nobody who got lucky on a singing competition." The audience gasped collectively. Kelly didn't flinch. "No, you don't have to sit here. In fact, I think it's time you left." "Excuse me?" Harry's face flushed red. "You heard me," Kelly said firmly. "This is my show. These are my guests in the audience, people who took time out of their busy lives to be here. And I won't let you disrespect them or me any longer. You need to leave." Harry laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You can't kick me off your show." "Do you have any idea who I am?" Kelly crossed her arms. "I know exactly who you are. And right now, you're someone who's being asked to leave my studio." "This is absurd," Harry shouted, his composure completely shattered now. "I'm a prince. You can't treat me like some common guest." "On my show, everyone is a common guest," Kelly replied calmly. "And every guest is expected to show basic respect and decency. You've failed at both. Security, please escort our guest out." 2 security guards appeared from the wings. Harry looked around wildly, as if expecting someone to come to his defense. The audience sat in stunned silence, phones now out and recording despite the rules. This was unprecedented. This was television gold. This was a disaster. "You'll regret this," Harry hissed as the guards approached. "Do you know what kind of backlash this will cause? My lawyers will bury you." Kelly's expression didn't change. "I'll take my chances. I've dealt with worse than entitled guests throwing tantrums." "Tantrums?" Harry's voice rose to a near shriek. "I am not throwing a tantrum. I am simply refusing to be disrespected by some American nobody who thinks she's important because she can carry a tune." The security guards each took one of Harry's arms. He tried to shake them off, but they held firm without being aggressive. Professional, calm, efficient, just like Kelly herself. "Get your hands off me," Harry demanded, his voice cracking. "I'm a member of the royal family." "This is assault." Kelly turned to the audience, ignoring Harry's continued protests. "I apologize that you all had to witness this. This isn't the kind of show we run here. We're about positivity, kindness, and lifting people up, not tearing them down because of where they came from." The audience erupted in applause, drowning out Harry's complaints as the security guards guided him toward the exit. He continued to struggle and shout, but his words were lost in the noise of the cheering crowd. "This isn't over," Harry shouted one last time before disappearing through the stage door. "You haven't heard the last of this." Kelly waited until the door closed behind him before turning back to her audience. She took a deep breath, visibly composing herself. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice remained strong. "Well," she said with a small, rueful smile, "that was not how I expected this morning to go." The audience laughed, a release of tension that had been building throughout the entire confrontation. Someone shouted, "You were amazing, Kelly." Others joined in with similar sentiments. Kelly held up her hands, asking for quiet. "Listen, I want to say something important. What just happened here, that kind of attitude, that looking down on people because of their background, it's wrong. It doesn't matter if you're a prince or a pauper. What matters is how you treat other human beings." The audience applauded again, and Kelly waited patiently for them to settle. "My mama taught me that everyone deserves respect until they prove they don't deserve it. And disrespecting hardworking Americans, disrespecting anyone trying to make a difference, that's where I draw the line." A woman in the front row stood up. "Kelly, you stood up for all of us. Thank you." Others joined her, and soon the entire audience was on their feet, giving Kelly a standing ovation. She looked genuinely moved, her eyes glistening with emotion. This was why she did what she did. This connection with real people, people who worked hard and deserved to be seen and heard. "Thank you," Kelly said softly into her microphone. "Thank you all so much. You know, we're going to take a quick break, collect ourselves, and when we come back, we're going to have some fun, because that's what this show is about. Joy, laughter, and celebrating each other. Sound good?" The audience cheered their agreement. As the cameras cut for the commercial break, Kelly remained standing, waving to her audience, her smile genuine despite the chaos that had just unfolded. Behind the scenes, producers scrambled, trying to figure out how to handle what had just transpired. Phones were ringing off the hook. Social media was already exploding with clips from audience members who had filmed the entire exchange. But Kelly wasn't worried about any of that. She had done what felt right. She had stood up for herself, for her audience, and for every person who had ever been made to feel less than because of where they came from or how much money they had. A production assistant approached her with a bottle of water. "You okay?" the young woman asked quietly. Kelly took the water gratefully, unscrewing the cap with steady hands. "Yeah, I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. Sometimes you have to stand up for what's right. Consequences be damned." The assistant grinned. "That was the most badass thing I've ever seen on live television." Kelly laughed, some of the tension finally leaving her shoulders. "Just doing my job." Which, apparently, includes bouncing out guests who think being born into privilege makes them better than everyone else. Backstage, Harry was still causing a scene. His voice could be heard echoing through the halls as he demanded to speak to managers, producers, anyone who would listen to his complaints. The security guards stood nearby, ready to intervene if needed, but maintaining a respectful distance. "This is unacceptable," Harry was shouting at a producer. "Do you understand who I am? Do you have any concept of the position I hold?" The producer, a woman in her 50s who had seen everything in her 30 years in television, remained completely calm. "Sir, I need you to collect your belongings and leave the premises. If you refuse, we will be forced to call the police." "The police? You're threatening me with the police?" Harry's face had gone from red to purple. "This is harassment. This is discrimination." "No, sir," the producer replied evenly. "This is the natural consequence of your behavior. You were disrespectful to our host and our audience. You were given multiple opportunities to correct your behavior, and instead you escalated the situation. Miss Clarkson has every right to remove you from her show." Harry opened his mouth to argue further, but something in the producer's expression must have finally gotten through to him. He snapped his mouth shut, grabbed his jacket from a nearby chair, and stormed toward the exit. "You'll all regret this," he muttered as he passed. "Every single one of you." The producer watched him go, then turned to the security guards. "Make sure he leaves the building, and alert the front desk that he's not to be readmitted under any circumstances." Back in the studio, the commercial break was ending. Kelly had touched up her makeup, taken a few more sips of water, and centered herself. She was a professional, and the show must go on. As the cameras came back on, Kelly's smile was bright and genuine. "Welcome back, everyone. As you can probably tell, we've had a bit of an unexpected turn this morning. But you know what? That's life. Sometimes things don't go according to plan, and you just have to roll with it." The audience cheered supportively. Kelly continued, her voice warm and sincere. "I want to take a moment to talk about something important. Growing up, I didn't have much. My family struggled financially, and there were times when we didn't know if we'd have enough money for basic necessities. But my mom, she always taught me that our worth wasn't determined by our bank account or our zip code." She paused, letting her words sink in. "She taught me that how we treat people, especially those who can't do anything for us in return, that's what shows our true character. And I've tried to live by that principle every single day of my life." A man in the audience shouted, "And you do, Kelly, you're amazing." Kelly laughed, wiping at her eyes. "Y'all are going to make me cry." But seriously, what happened earlier, that attitude of looking down on people because they didn't grow up wealthy or privileged, it's something we all need to stand against. Everyone has value, everyone has worth, and everyone deserves to be treated with basic human dignity and respect. The audience erupted in applause once more. Kelly let them cheer for a moment before raising her hands to quiet them down. Okay, enough of the heavy stuff. Let's get back to what we do best, having fun and celebrating the incredible people who make this world a better place." Our next guest is a teacher from Ohio who started a program providing free meals to students in need. Please welcome Sarah Mitchell. A woman in her 40s walked onto the stage, beaming with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Kelly greeted her with a warm hug, and the two sat down together. The contrast from the earlier interview couldn't have been more stark. "Sarah, thank you so much for being here," Kelly said genuinely. "Tell us about this amazing program you started." Sarah smiled shyly. "Well, it's nothing too fancy. I just noticed that some of my students were coming to school hungry, and I knew that had to affect their ability to learn. So I started bringing in extra food, just sandwiches and fruit at first. Then other teachers joined in, and parents started donating. Now we feed about 200 kids every day." 200 kids, Kelly repeated, shaking her head in amazement. "That's incredible. And you're doing this all out of your own pocket?" "We've had some donations," Sarah explained. "But yeah, a lot of it comes from teachers buying food with our own money. We don't mind though, these kids need us." Kelly reached under her desk and pulled out an oversized check. "Well, Sarah, that's why we wanted to have you on the show. Because this is what real charity looks like. This is what making a difference means. And we want to help. We're giving your program $50,000 to continue feeding those kids." Sarah's hands flew to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The audience went wild, cheering and clapping. This was the magic of the show. This was why people tuned in every day. Real people helping real people with no condescension, no looking down from ivory towers. As the show continued, the earlier confrontation began to feel like a distant memory, though everyone knew it would dominate the news cycle for days to come. But Kelly didn't care about that. She had stayed true to herself, stood up for what was right, and then moved on to do what she did best, celebrating people who made the world better through simple acts of kindness and compassion. When the taping finally wrapped, Kelly thanked her audience one more time. "You all are the best. Thank you for your support today. Thank you for standing with me. And remember, kindness matters. How we treat each other matters. Don't let anyone ever make you feel small because of where you came from. Your worth comes from who you are, not what you have." The audience gave her one final standing ovation as the cameras stopped rolling. Kelly walked off stage, her head held high, knowing she had done the right thing. In a world where celebrities often stayed silent to avoid controversy, she had spoken up. She had defended herself and her audience against someone who thought his title made him superior. And in those 34 seconds, when Harry had made his most insulting comment, Kelly had made a choice. She could have laughed it off, could have played it safe, could have let him continue his tirade. Instead, she had stood her ground. She had shown that no title, no amount of royal blood, no claim to superiority would ever justify treating people with disrespect. That's what made Kelly Clarkson not just a great host, but a great person. She remembered where she came from. She remembered what it was like to struggle, and she used her platform not to elevate herself, but to lift others up. That was the difference between her and Prince Harry. That was the difference between true class and entitled arrogance. That was why, when the moment came to choose between protecting a powerful guest or protecting her values, Kelly chose her values every single time. The confrontation had started so innocently. When Kelly first welcomed Harry onto the set, she had genuinely been excited to speak with him. She had prepared thoughtful questions about his charitable foundation, his work with veterans, and his efforts to raise awareness about mental health issues. These were topics close to her heart, causes she herself supported through her own platform and resources. But from the very first answer, something had felt off. The way Harry spoke about his work had an edge to it, a subtle superiority that made Kelly pause. She had given him the benefit of the doubt at first, thinking perhaps she was misreading his tone. After all, cultural differences existed, and sometimes British formality could come across differently to American audiences. But then came the comment about people from less privileged backgrounds not understanding complex humanitarian work. That's when Kelly knew this wasn't a cultural misunderstanding. This was arrogance, pure and simple. This was a man who genuinely believed his birth circumstances made him inherently superior to others. What Harry didn't understand, what he couldn't understand from his position of lifelong privilege, was that Kelly's background gave her a unique perspective on charity and helping others. She didn't help people because it looked good or because it was expected of her position. She helped because she remembered what it was like to need help. She remembered the kindness of strangers who had supported her, family, during their hardest times. When Harry had called her charitable efforts quaint, something inside Kelly had snapped, not with anger, but with clarity. This was a man who would never understand what her show meant to people. He would never understand why a teacher like Sarah Mitchell, sacrificing her own money to feed hungry children, was more impressive than any royal gala or fundraising ball. The moment Harry had mentioned her supposed trailer park origins, Kelly had known the interview was over, not because the comment hurt her personally, but because it revealed everything about his character. He had done his research on her, learning about her humble beginnings, and instead of respecting her journey, he had weaponized it. He had tried to shame her for something she considered her greatest source of strength. Kelly's mother had always told her that you could tell a lot about a person by how they treated those they considered beneath them. By that measure, Harry had failed. Spectacularly. He had looked at Kelly, at her audience, at everyday Americans, and found them wanting simply because they hadn't been born into royalty. What made the situation even more infuriating was Harry's complete lack of self-awareness. He seemed genuinely surprised when Kelly pushed back against his comments. He appeared shocked that she would dare challenge him, as if his title should protect him from accountability for his words and behavior. But Kelly had learned long ago that titles meant nothing compared to character. She had interviewed presidents and homeless people, celebrities and teachers, billionaires and struggling single parents. And she had learned that kindness, compassion, and basic human decency had nothing to do with bank accounts or bloodlines. When she had finally told Harry to leave, the look on his face had been priceless. Complete and utter disbelief. No one had ever kicked him off a show before. No one had ever dared to tell him his behavior was unacceptable. And that was exactly the problem. He had gone through life surrounded by people who either revered his position or were too intimidated to call him out. Kelly wasn't intimidated. She had faced rejection, criticism, and doubt throughout her career. She had been told she wasn't pretty enough, thin enough, or polished enough to succeed. She had proved all those doubters wrong through hard work, talent, and determination. A prince with an attitude problem was hardly going to shake her confidence. The audience's reaction had been the most gratifying part of the entire ordeal. They had supported her immediately and completely. They had booed Harry's comments, cheered her responses, and given her standing ovations. These were regular people, working-class Americans who understood exactly what was happening. They saw someone attacking their host, their champion, and they rallied around her. That connection with her audience was what Kelly valued most. They trusted her to stand up for them, to represent them, to show that you didn't need wealth or privilege to have dignity and worth. And she had done exactly that. She had looked a prince in the eye and told him he was wrong. She had defended not just herself, but everyone who had ever been made to feel inferior because of their circumstances. As security had escorted Harry out, Kelly had felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief that the confrontation was over, satisfaction that she had stood her ground, and sadness that it had been necessary at all. She had genuinely wanted to have a meaningful conversation about important issues. Instead, she had been forced to give a lesson in basic respect and human decency. But the way she had handled the situation, with firmness but without cruelty, with strength but without vindictiveness, that was Kelly Clarkson in a nutshell. She didn't need to belittle Harry the way he had tried to belittle her. She simply stated the facts, set her boundaries, and enforced them. She treated him with more respect than he had shown her, even while removing him from her show. The interview with Sarah Mitchell afterward had been the perfect antidote to the ugliness. Here was a woman making a real difference, not for recognition or praise, but because she saw a need and chose to fill it. She wasn't doing it from a place of privilege. She was doing it from genuine care for her students. That was the kind of person Kelly wanted to celebrate. People who gave from their own limited resources to help others. People who understood that making a difference didn't require grand gestures. Sometimes it just required seeing someone in need and choosing to help. The $50,000 donation had been planned before the show started, but giving it after the Harry incident felt especially meaningful. This is what matters. This is what real charity looks like. Not looking down from a palace, but getting in the trenches and offering real help. Kelly knew the incident would dominate headlines. Some would criticize her for being too harsh. Others would praise her for standing her ground. But Kelly didn't make her decision based on how it would play in the media. She made it based on what was right. And what was right was refusing to let someone use her platform to spread messages of superiority. What was right was showing her audience that no one had the right to look down on hardworking people. What was right was standing up for the values her mother had instilled in her. She thought about Harry, probably still convinced he had been wronged. She wondered if he would ever understand why what he said was so offensive. Probably not. People like that rarely had the self-awareness to recognize their failings. What Kelly hoped was that the incident would spark conversations about respect. She hoped people would recognize everyone's worth, regardless of circumstances. If one person decided to treat others with more respect, it would be worth. That was the lesson from those 34 explosive seconds.